Well, hello, greetings to you. Welcome to this open Q&A session. We do these periodically, and as I always say, if you're watching right here live, right with me, you can enter any questions you have into the comment box below the video, or if you're watching this in the future as a video replay, same thing, you can put your comment into the box, and I will bring that forward to the next session. Now we have something new as well. You can do more than type. Like if you're here with me live, you can actually come into the studio with me. You can go onto your computer camera, and if your question is a little bit more involved, we can have more of a dialogue about that. It's easier than typing, and it takes a lot of finger effort to get all the words out, but it's so easy to talk. So anyways, if you're here with me live, the box is open for your questions, and otherwise, I'm going to kick off today with some questions we've gotten by email this week, just to you know, kind of get things in motion. And let me just switch my screen so I can look at my notes here. And this question is in general, it's about the condition of autism and how Heilkunst treats it. But the particular person asking the questions has kind of set up a little bit of a difficulty because she's asking highly specific questions. This is about her son who's being treated for autism. Her questions are very, very specific. But however, there's two problems in why I can't answer many of her questions directly. One is that he's not a patient at our clinic, right? I've never seen this boy. I've never treated his case. I don't know his case. I don't have even the file of his case and the history. So I have no way of answering all the specific questions because what could I answer? It's like, well, this is a case I don't know. So as I say, what I'm going to do, I'm still going to make this a useful discussion. I'm going to take the content of her questions and raise them up to the more general level, into the level of Heilkund's principles and concepts, so we can understand how we go about treating autism in the first place. So I think it'll still be helpful for this person asking these questions, but yeah, for that reason, I simply my hands are tied in the sense I don't have the answers because I don't know the case. So as I say, why she's asking me such specific questions is a little bit odd. And I want to point out some things. I will go through some of her questions and some of her content, and I think it's a really good teaching moment. It really illustrates a lot of the misconceptions people seem to come to Heilkunst with, and we'll kind of see clues of that in the way she's asking some of her questions. So we'll take this as a good teaching moment where everyone can understand autism treatment better than when we started today. That's kind of my goal. So let's take a look here. So let's say I'm not going to reveal any of her personal details or her name or her email address or anything like that. And oh yeah, by the way, not only do I not know this specific case, which I'm being asked to comment on, but in general, even if I did, we have a very high standard in our clinic of keeping patient confidentiality. I mean, not just for ethical and legal reasons. Somebody expects confidentiality, we want to give it to them, but even just for the nature of how we work deeply in Heilkunst, it's a very deep personal process, and it gets more and more difficult for a person to kind of get to that level of sharing and vulnerability and exposing the inner content of their experience in their life if they don't have that absolute feeling of safety that their information is kind of staying in that cone of silence. It's not going to go anywhere. So, anyways, as I say, even if I knew this case, I wouldn't even have been given the permission at this point to share it publicly. So, anyways, for all these reasons, I'm giving all this kind of preface here for a good reason. We're going to still make good use of these questions, but I'm just explaining why we're going to have to answer them at the more general level, kind of at a broader level than at the detail level, just because, yeah, we don't have any entry point for those two reasons. So, anyways, let me get into some of the actual the form of the questions here. So, yeah, basically, she started out in her email by saying, "I've been working with another Heilkunst practitioner, and my son still has gut issues and picky eating and sensory issues with his autism. Okay, well, that's a fair enough question. That's a fair enough situation. And yeah, she, as I say, even I don't know his case, but those are certainly some of the most common symptoms and characteristics of autism. So I already understand the ballpark that's being worked in here. But what's kind of implied in her question is um, is this idea of well, actually, let me start with this point. This is actually a really good starting point. When a moment ago, when I was mentioning the misconceptions about Heilkunst, I guess this is really the one of the most widespread misconceptions is people kind of come to Heilkunst, or I guess they do this with a lot of alternative modalities. They come with an allopathic outlook, and they bring that allopathic outlook into a new format. So it's like, okay, I don't want to go over there to the medical doctors. I don't like the pharmaceutical approach and all the things people complain about in Western medicine. They want something different, but they still bring the same allopathic frame of mind to the new place. So yeah. So back to her question when she's saying, yeah, my son has been treated, but he still has sensor issues and this and that. Like he's the symptoms aren't gone. The big misconception here that as I say, almost most people I see at some point have come with this. Myself too. Before I was deeply into Heilkunst, I had this same allopathic mind. It's hard to avoid. It's everywhere. It's how we think about health. It's how we to the degree we've gone to doctors and had different experiences. It just seems to be the way we have to think about things. You have a symptom, you get a label, and then you get a drug, and that drug is supposed to get rid of the symptom, and then you can erase your label. It's like, well, as I said, that's very allopathic. But for the first reason being that let's take this label called autism, and in a sense, there's no such thing. I know that sounds like a crazy statement. Well, it's like, we know the statistics and there's so much autism and it's, 1 in 21 boys or whatever the number is right now. And it's like, well, when I say there's no such thing, I'm kind of being provocative intentionally, but it's this idea that you can take that label, autism, and you can give it to 1,000 different, different children, different patients, but to the degree that there's something going on, yes, I acknowledge that. Of course, there is a phenomena that we're seeing in all these, thousands and thousands and thousands of children and adults as well. But the label does it a great injustice because it gives us the illusion that there's just one thing called autism. And when somebody has that label, autism, they have the same thing as everybody else with that label. But Heilkunst cannot work that way. It's we have to get way much deeper into an individual case than that generic label. Yes, the generic label brings us into the ballpark, but it does almost nothing in terms of telling us what we need to do for that individual case. So yeah, already with that starting point of, okay, we've come for autism, we're treated by this practitioner, but some things have improved, but these things haven't. So it's already displaying this widespread misconception that we have to treat a label, which is impossible. You cannot treat a label. And as I say, whether it's Heilkunst, whether it's another modality, whether it's one Heilkunst practitioner or another, anyone who says they can treat a label, either they're under that misconception themselves, or they're just trying to bypass some of the problems of that. They're trying to make things look better than they might otherwise. So yeah, we can't treat a label, but that's not a hopeless statement. Actually, it's a very positive statement in that we can, on a one-on-one individual basis, we can cure whatever is behind that so-called label of autism. We have a great success rate. We've turned around many autism cases, but again, on this basis, not that we got rid of a label, but that we got into the depths of what's going on with that individual, right? So now, and there's one more thing I want to add into this too. So yeah, I keep emphasizing this idea of the individual. We need to, treat the individual case and what the features are. But what we can also say, which is also true at the same time, there are universally true principles. Right. And I'll come back to this in a couple of minutes. I want to talk about the details of that some more. But we have these universal principles of curing and healing, which never change, just like the law of gravity doesn't change, and the laws of aerodynamics don't change, and whatever the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear, all these laws of chemistry and physics, and these are constant truths. You don't wake up tomorrow morning floating up on the ceiling because gravity forgot to punch in at work that day. No, it's constant, it's universal. The principles are always there. So, in our context of healing and curing and how we apply Heilkunst, we can always count on those universal principles. They're not going to change tomorrow. They're not going to, they're not going to work for some people, but not for other people. Like they're just there and they're universal. But that being said, what I opened with a few minutes ago, we need to take those universal principles and apply them in a very individual case, because the details and the facts of an individual case are going to call for, well, this has to be done first for this person, and then we can go on to this, and then we can go on to that. That's a bit of our idea of sequential treatment. It's not just the sequential timeline. I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's a specific part of our modality, but it's yeah, that universal principle has to be applied to the individual, which is going to take a different sequence of which principle you apply first, and which part of their history do you untangle first, which part of their diet to untangle first. Whatever it is, there's going to be an individual sequence based on those universal principles. So yeah, so right from the outset, we really want to establish a foundation here where we can kind of have a conversation together. If one person, is talking about universal principles, but the other person is talking about illusions, as in medical labels, you can't have a conversation. Because one person, it's just like if you've ever traveled somewhere where a different language is spoken. If you don't speak that language, you have a lot of trouble. It's like you have to do a lot of hand gestures and and pantomime to try to get even a basic message across. But yeah, if we're not speaking the same language, we can't kind of get through the same understanding what's happening in Heilkunst. So yeah, so there is no autism as far as a label goes, but there is cure. There are these universal principles of cure, and yes, we have activated them time and time and time again. There's no need to convince myself or anybody else that those universal principles work. They're they're consistent, they're reliable, and anyways, you get the point. I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit now, but yeah. So we start with that. So this idea of, she's been to treatment with a Heilkunst practitioner or still in process, but not getting the full 100% results yet. Well, a general thing I would say, again, speaking to the label of autism, generally speaking, these can be quite deep cases, right? So yes, we have our universal principles, and I'll talk more about the three different jurisdictions. But when I say deep, what that means is these can be cases that take a fairly longer time to get all the way 100% to cure than a less complicated case. Basically, like you have much more depth, much more complexity, many more genetic factors and possible environment and diet. And again, I don't know this specific case, as I said at the beginning, but in general, when we see autism, we generally see a whole complex of of overlapping problems and compounded problems, and things that have compounded over the generations, things that in the patient's timeline, what were their reactions to vaccines, assuming they had vaccines, or what other environmental traumas were there, or any kind of family upset or anything that happened along the way. You have this whole individual timeline, plus the genetics, plus the environmental factors, plus the what's going on in the diet and all the rest of it. So what we tend to see in this label of autism, in one way or another, many of these cases are very deep and very complex. So yeah, so this question, as I say, it's not a bad question where she starts. We've been through treatment, but we still have these issues are kind of persisting. It's like, yeah, this question is basically asking for more of this appreciation of how deep is an autism case in general, and of course, more specifically for this mother and this patient, how deep is her son's case. So obviously, as I say, I don't know anything about the details of his case, but he sounds like we're a little bit more in the typical range of autism treatment, where we have more complexity and it takes more time to get all the way to the bottom. So again, as I say, I don't know his case specifically, but I'm already getting enough clues of where I can start to think about what might be going on in some aspects of his case. So yeah, we have all that. I'm just looking back at my notes again now. Oh yeah, she asked this other question, and this kind of again illustrates. A few minutes ago, I was mentioning a lot of the misconceptions people bring to Heilkunst, and she kind of illuminates one of the big ones here again. Again, I'm not blaming her. A lot of miseducation, misinformation is out there, and people are constantly coming with these kind of misinformed questions. So I don't blame the patient. I don't blame this mother. But yeah, we as I said, these are for whatever reason, these ideas have been difficult for people to get straight. But hopefully we can rectify that today, get more clarity on what's actually going on with some of these Heilkunst concepts. So, anyways, her question says, I'll just read it verbatim here. She says, "I guess I'm unsure if Heilkunst is a good fit, or if I need to switch homeopaths who focus more on individualized constitutionals rather than one of the seven main one used in Heilkunst." Okay, so as I said, there's a major misconception, or a set of misconceptions built into that question, and it comes from the whole world of what's called classical homeopathy, and it can very easily be traced back to where this misconception came from. In the classical homeopathic approach, the so-called classical approach, because it's not classical in the meaning of classical going back to the true roots. It has another meaning, but we don't have to talk about that. This meaning of the constitutional treatment in classical homeopathy has been greatly distorted. Right, and let me start from the correct version, and then I'll explain the distortion. So the correct version, actually, and this question that was asked here, she referred to the seven constitutional types, and again, I don't blame any misinformation that's out there, but yeah, there are not seven, there are six. There are six genotypes. These are basic personality types, but that she says seven, it's close enough. I understand what she's saying, but of these six genotypes, these are true personality types. They're from nature. They're from the way the human being is structured and the personality is structured. These six genotypes, yes, we use that as a part of Heilkunst treatment, but you cannot cure autism. You cannot cure any condition just by treating the Constitution. So this is the great misunderstanding that classical homeopathy has given this world, the world of homeopathy, is they have this idea that's called constitutional treatment, but they're not talking about what I'm talking about. They're talking about this weird abstract idea that you just have to take a patient, take a case, take all their symptoms and all their 100,000, 10,000 symptoms, write them all down, maybe run them through a computer, whatever. But what you're supposed to do as a classical homeopath is take the whole picture of all the symptoms and boil it down to this one abstract picture and give one remedy that's called the constitutional remedy. But as I said, this is a big abstraction and it's a big illusion, because what you're treating is kind of a mirage at that point. You're not treating the actual diseases that are underneath that person's condition. Back to earlier when I was saying we can't treat a label, the further extension of that idea is you don't treat the label, you have to treat, because a label is an abstraction, similar to what I'm saying here, you have to treat the real diseases underneath the label. So in this idea of classical homeopathy, of constitutional treatment, as I said already, it's a great big abstraction, it's a great big illusion, it's a mirage. It's bundling all these things together as supposed to be one unified thing, but they're all different things. It's like, well, maybe this group of symptoms is coming from dietary imbalances, maybe this group of symptoms is coming from underlying actual diseases, not labels, actual diseases. Maybe this group of symptoms is coming from, some of the kind of the mental confusion the person is kind of projecting into the world or whatever. I'm just, kind of abstracting it out a little bit, but we want in an individual case, we want to get to the reality of all these things I'm saying, and you will find very quickly you don't come to one remedy, one homeopathic remedy that somehow takes care of all the things mushed together. It's like, well, as I said, that's an illusion, it's an abstraction, and it's dangerous because we get very unsuccessful results from that classical approach. At best, they can claim a 10 to 15% success rate, at best. And that's terrible for a medical system. That's a terrible success rate. In our experience in Heilkunst, our success rate is at least 90 to 95% and higher, because, as I say, we have this clarity of principles and we haven't fallen into these misconceptions of so-called constitutional treatment, and so on and so on. So, anyways, now all that to say, let's say we get rid of that misconception. Let's say we've solved that problem. Let's go a little bit deeper into this question. The idea of giving the genotype, the actual constitutional remedy, these one of six that I mentioned earlier, that's only the beginning. That's only the beginning. It doesn't, yes, it may help balance the person and help them feel a little more comfortable within their own skin, so to speak, but it hasn't even begun to address all the underlying causes of that label of autism. You can balance the personality, as I'm saying, but what about the vaccine shots? What about the genetic inheritance? What about the environmental toxins? What about the mental confusion projected in the state of mind of the family of that child's household or whatever? It's like all these different levels are all contributing factors to what's real factors to what's creating that illusion of the label of autism. So again, we want to get off the illusion, get into the real factors. So again, this idea of switching practitioners for someone who does constitutional treatment, well, that's already a terrible idea, because first of all, that's often going to mean the constitutional treatment the way the classical homeopaths do it, which means the wrong way. And then two, even if you do the right constitutional remedy in the Heilkunst way, yeah, you have to go way beyond the Constitution to actually cure the root causes of the case. So, anyways, if I seem a little bit kind of animated about this issue, it's just like it's year after year, decade after decade, these misconceptions seem to keep recycling. So I figure if I talk a little louder and a little faster, maybe we can dispel with these misconceptions. So let's move on a little bit here. So looking back at my notes, so yeah, I've talked about a lot of the main ideas that we kind of want to come through, around this discussion. And I already said in so many words, the main orientation or the direction we take in Heilkunst is, yes, we always begin and end with the universal principles. Say law of gravity never changes, the law of cure never changes. Like nature keeps being nature, it keeps doing what it does. So the universal principles we can count on, we can rely on. But what I've also hinted at in various ways here, we need to take those universal principles and drill down into a very individualized approach to what's going on for that person, for that case. What is their history? How do they react to certain foods? What's their behavior? What is their sleep like? Are they disturbed? Do they have nightmares? Whatever. We take all the individual items of the case, but not for the purpose of some kind of abstract constitutional remedy, like I talked about a moment ago, but individualizing to get at the real factors. We want real treatment, not illusory treatment. Real, not illusory. So So all that to say, I kind of want to wrap up with some more concrete things again. And this is again, if I talk louder and I talk faster, this is one of these topics, what I'm about to say, that I hope I can educate more and more people about, because not just in homeopathy and Heilkunst, but really all of healthcare, all of natural medicine, all of the modalities out there, if only these next three concepts were understood, we could have a much better world of healthcare, because so many illusions would fall away, so much clarity would come in, so much better diagnosis would come in, and the modalities could actually start having a discussion with each other, and we can have a true, this dream of integrated medicine, where a patient can kind of be treated by a team of practitioners. Beautiful, lovely. I love that idea, but let's do it based on these universal principles, not based on more illusions, because that's what I see in this world of integrative medicine. It's just like they've turned the corner from allopathic medicine, and they think, okay, we're going to do things better now, but they just recreate the same old illusions all over again. So, the same abstractions, the same illusions. So the next three principles I want to give you is the key, not just for homeopathy, not just for Heilkunst, but really, if you're interested in anything about healthcare, it has to begin and end with these three principles that I'm about to tell you. So when it comes to a Heilkunst case, but as I say, really when it comes to what should be in every modality, you should have this way of thinking, just apply it to their own modality, is we have three different jurisdictions of healthcare, right? So the first jurisdiction is called therapeutic regimen. So regimen is all the basic stuff. Eat a healthy diet, drink enough water, do healthy amount of exercise, get good sleep, detox your body, from the environmental toxins, and just kind of keep everything in a state of harmonious balance. Like what's that expression about? Like doing everything in moderation. Well, that's sort of the idea. We want to be balanced, do things in moderation, not go off to extremes. Not eat, like, we can have a little bit of bad food once in a while, birthday cake at your relative's birthday party or whatever, because you're celebrating. But if you're eating that kind of food every day, sugar and refined flour and additives and all the things that are in birthday cake, if that's your regular diet, you're going to create a big problem. We know this, right? We know this idea about regimen and keeping balance, eating nutritious food and naturally grown food and all the rest. So all of this is fairly obvious and fairly common sense. Now, whether people do it or not, that's a question. And this is the area I like to keep it in the context of autism. And actually, this was in one of the questions I just read a few minutes ago. Some of the challenge in autism, they can, like, we have this great disruption often in autism between the brain gut connection, right? And there are studies now, and there's research which really expands on this. It's like we have two brains in a sense, the one up here in the skull and the one down here in the gut. And that's where we get kind of our rational intellectual brain or mind, and that's where we get our emotional mind. We have two minds. And so anyways, at the nutritional level, we see this where people have a poor diet, or for one reason or another, or can't absorb foods for one reason or another. We get this disruption in the brain gut connection. So this is very prominent in autism. It's prominent in many other conditions as well, but yeah, it's certainly here. So this whole business of diet is kind of, it becomes a little bit of a more complex problem in autism, because it's the child is picky and they don't want to eat and they have the gut problems, but it's hard to help them correct their diet because they kind of get kind of stuck in that mode. So it's kind of like we have to temporarily suspend our attention, to some degree, to that first area of regimen, and start to go up the ladder to the second and the third jurisdiction, so we can start undoing the causes of what's caused the brain gut disruption, and what's caused some of the behavior disruptions, and so on and so on, so that we can start to gain a doorway in to getting a better diet installed for that patient, right? Where it actually becomes possible to engage with more healthy dietary selections and things like that. So the normal logic of treatment, starts at that lowest jurisdiction and then works up. But in some of these more complex cases, we kind of have to start in an unusual place, up in the second and or third jurisdiction, and then slowly work our way back to the first. So it's sort of a counterintuitive thing, but that just has to do with some of the complexities going on in autism. So, anyways, that's the first jurisdiction. As I say, lots of common sense, whether people do it or not. Eat well, eat a healthy diet, and all that. Going up to the second jurisdiction, that's where now we get strictly into the area of homeopathy. The literal meaning of the word homeopathy is like cures like, or the law of similars. So that's where we give, if a child has a certain kind of fever, a red face and high temperature, and all these certain symptoms, the similar homeopathic remedy may be belladonna. And, so that's when we end up often using belladonna to treat certain children's fevers. Just using that as an example, but that's the law of similars, like cures like, in comparison with that first jurisdiction of regimen. And I didn't name this, but where we in homeopathy we have this like cures like law of opposites. In regimen we have the law of opposites. So if somebody is not eating enough vitamin C, then they need to do the opposite. They need more vitamin C. If somebody has too much of something, they need to have less of it. So it's just the law of opposite is just about getting things back into balance. If this is way too up, well, we need to bring it more down and back into balance. So that's an opposite. But in medicine, homeopathy, we have the law of similar. So where belladonna is very similar to certain presentations of a fever, that medicine is very similar to the disease. So that's where that becomes the curative treatment. And now, big things in that second jurisdiction for autism, I've already mentioned these along the way here, but these are, a lot of the vaccine shocks, and needing to detox, what's happened in the aftermath of someone's vaccines. We have the area of the genetic inheritance I've mentioned. So certain genetic patterns run through a family, whether heart disease, cancer, allergies, all the big name label things. Again, you know about what I'm going to say about labels ultimately, but I'm just kind of giving you an indication here. When all these genetic information runs through a given family tree in various combinations, those can be some of the deeper roots of autism as well. So again, we get into this second jurisdiction of like cures like, homeopathy. And yeah, we go from the vaccine shocks and traumas, the other shocks and traumas, emotional shocks, and then we get deeper and deeper into the family genetics. So what did people die of in the family? Was there heart disease, cancer? All these, and we just kind of get a picture of what's going on in the broader family history. Because the individual has their history. We all have our own history, but we're also part of a broader history of a family. We've all come from a family, right? Babies don't actually come from the stork, if that's what you're still thinking. And then, so yeah, first two jurisdictions, law of opposites, law of similars. The third jurisdiction I've hinted at a little bit. It's kind of the hardest to encapsulate because it covers a lot. But as I say, I've hinted at this today, and it really gets into the area of where previously I was talking about law of opposites and law of similars. We could call this therapeutic principle the law of truth. Now, I know that sounds like a little bit of a loaded statement. It's like, well, whose truth? Like, who are you to tell me the truth? Or like, are you a guru? Do you know better than me? Like, why, like, isn't truth relative and we're all in our own truth? Well, no, in the sense that there is an objective truth. I mean, not that we all see it clearly or whatever. We all have our own illusions. But this idea in therapeutics, in medicine, and as I say, I hinted of this earlier, with especially around the autistic child, what is that kind of family illusion or kind of the family state of mind that autistic child is picking up? So let's say, the whole tone and state of mind in the family is one of high stress. It's like, oh, my work life is so stressful. This is one of the parents talking, and this and that is happening, and then of course we're stressed because of taking care of all the medical issues of an autistic child. So the stress level just keeps going up, 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 and up. But that, in a sense, becomes a conundrum where that family stress state of mind kind of keeps impacting and keeps deepening the pre-existing condition of whatever's causing the autism. So in that third jurisdiction, as I say, I'm just barely hinting at it here, this whole area of what I'm calling the area of the law of truth. But it is true. It is true. There is objective truth, as I say. And if people are living outside of their individual truth, and let's just give a classic example. You probably know any number of examples of people around you in life who, maybe as a child, as a young adult, whatever it was, they had a certain dream. They wanted to maybe be an artist or a musician or a photographer or some creative profession like that. But their parents made them go to school to study something more practical. Oh, you have to be an accountant or a lawyer or this or that. So in that sense, that person is kind of forced into this life, living this life where they are not living in their own truth. And then, health problems and symptoms and various things can emerge out of living in an illusion in that sense. Now, in the case of autism, the way I was just framing it a moment ago, in the child, that's typically coming from the parents' stresses, the parents' illusions, the parents' state of mind, which is kind of having a direct impact on the autism case of the child. And this is one of the many reasons why we encourage that. As I say, the autistic case can be deep and complex for many reasons. This is one of the reasons that we tend to go a lot faster and do a lot better with autism cases where at least one, if not both of the parents are also being treated at the same time, so that they can kind of untangle their own health knots, their own illusions, and their own whatever else is bearing on them. So anyways, that third jurisdiction in the autism cases, yeah, it tends to kind of exist at these levels I'm talking about, but there are many other factors. Again, we can spend all day just talking about the third jurisdiction, but I just want to give you a hint of it here. So that's the basic, the long and the short of it. The basic, how we begin to think about an autism case. As I said, we have to get into the very individual history, but some of these general concepts and principles are going to help us frame it and help us ask the right questions and kind of progress in the right way. But yeah, as I say, my main goal today was to kind of give you more of that sense of the general framework, the general principles, so we can start to, as I say, now from here we can take any one individual case and work through it in the most logical way. But as I say, there's no two cases, like they say no two snowflakes look alike. It's sort of like that. No two cases will ever look alike as far as the details go, but of course they will all be perfectly identical as far as the general principles. So I hope as I haven't been a little bit too repetitive on some points as I explained. I kind of get tired of the same misconceptions year in, year out. But yeah, I hope we've created something valuable here where you can start to see not just Heilkunst but healthcare in a clearer light, like and start to make sense of, yeah, say even if someone is a nutritionist or a massage therapist or whatever, to take these principles, you can start to accelerate any modality to help whatever case it's trying to work on. So I'll leave it at that, and yeah, I'll leave this session open for another minute, give or take. If anyone has any additional questions or even different topics, we can go into different topics. But yeah, otherwise, I will see you at the next session. And as I said earlier, you can submit a question in between. We actually now have a new way. Instead of just typing, you can actually video record yourself speaking your question. Speaking for a lot of us is easier than pecking at the keyboard and letter by letter, word by word. Like, it's just so much faster and easier to talk. So that's an option you'll find at our page, and I put that link here, thearcanum.ca/live. You can always see what our next question and answer date will be, and where you can put your questions in, things like that. But otherwise, yeah, there are no further questions have come in today. So thank you all for being here, and yeah, we will see you at the next session.